Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from today. Welcome to the Youth Resilience in the Digital Age Conference. On behalf of the Canadian Teachers Federation and the Boys and Girls Clubs of Canada, we would like to recognize the contributions of the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples of Canada. In honor of reconciliation in education, we acknowledge and give gratitude to the Indigenous peoples whose lands we are on today. My name is Jamili Baroud, and I am the Program Officer for the Canadian Teachers Federation. I'll be responsible for moderating this session today from Vancouver, British Columbia. Before we start, I'd like to recognize that this initiative was made possible by funding from Employment and Social Development Canada, and that this week's conference is proudly co-hosted by the Canadian Teachers Federation and the Boys and Girls Clubs of Canada. Please also note that today's session will be recorded and available on the conference website by Tuesday of next week. A short Q&A period will follow the presentation, so please use the Q&A function to ask questions to the presenters or to communicate with technical staff. Please also feel free to use the chat function to connect with other participants, share resources, and interact. At the end of the presentation, I'll invite the presenters to answer your questions in the order that they were asked. And now I'm glad to welcome Paola Porcelli and Kara Chen from Kids Help Phone. Kara Chen is Manager of Community Crisis Responders with Kids Help Phone. Kara has 7 years experience working in youth crisis intervention, volunteer management, and community mental health counseling. Her research focus is around the experience of novice clinician self-care and burnout, building equitable and accessible supervision and supports to clinical frontline workers, and facilitating open discussions about workplace emotional distress. She currently oversees the team of 4,000 plus volunteer crisis responders at Kids Help Phone, who provide crisis support via SMS text to youth across Canada. Paola Porcelli owns a PhD in clinical psychology and psychopathology and has a background in clinical, community, and intercultural psychology. She's been working at Kids Help Phone as a clinical practice specialist for 4 years, providing training, capacity building, and clinical support to counselors. She's collaborated for over 15 years with public and private structures, nonprofit organizations, international NGOs, and universities located in different countries to manage and implement programs focused on capacity building for practitioners and the promotion of well-being for youth exposed to different forms of stressors. Her area of expertise is promoting resilience through participatory, strength-based, community-driven, and culturally sensitive approaches. Their presentation today is called From Learning to Supporting: Kids Help Phone's Insights and E-Mental Health Supports for Youth Mental Health and Well-Being. Welcome, Kara and Paola, and thank you for being with us today.
Thanks, Jamili. I'm going to share my screen.
Amazing. Thank you, Jamili, and thanks, Paola. So hi, everyone. My name is Kara, and I just wanted to quickly go over today's agenda. So we're going to talk a bit about, soliciting some of your thoughts on the reasons people reach out to Kids Help Phone. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the data from young people who have reached out to us in the last year compared to years past. We're going to cover a little bit about the different services that Kids Help Phone offers and our new stepped care model, which we're very excited to be rolling out this year. We're going to be giving a little bit of a virtual tour of all of our online resources that are available not only to teachers, caring adults, but also, of course, to young people who want to access those resources directly on our website. And then, of course, we're going to be leaving a little bit of time at the end for a Q&A session. So the next slide, we're going to just quickly do a little bit of an icebreaker. And I'm going to throw a link into the chat, and I highly recommend you just give that an old click and answer the question, just reflecting a little bit on the year. What do you think young people have reached out to us for? There's 3 spots that you can fill out. The topics or the issues that you think most young people have reached out to Kids Help Phone for support on in the year of 2020. And we can have a little debrief, a little chat about it. So I'll give you a couple minutes just to think about that. And the messages are going to start popping up. So anxiety, relationship, stress, definitely. Just wait a couple more And the really cool thing is that it's very dynamic, and as more suggestions come in with the same topic, the word will get bigger. And so I'm seeing some trends here. So anxiety, depression, and stress are among one of the biggest topics that folks think people reach out to us about, alongside bullying, loneliness, anxiety about school, wanting someone to listen empathetically. Oh my goodness, it's moving so much, that's awesome. Support for suicide, a COVID-related crisis, substance abuse, a lot of really great just points here around just someone to talk to, someone to listen. Family issues, abuse concerns, identity crises, a lot of relationships and isolation points here, which is great. Great points, advice. I'm like turning my head trying to read the ones that are sideways. Yes, crisis, anxiety about school, guidance, homelessness, human trafficking, lack of food. So, and I see also in the chat, anxiety and stress are coming up there. Yeah, this is absolutely a really comprehensive look at some of the things that people could reach out to us about. And, you know, just looking at this list, how it can go from something like school stress all the way to, you know, food insecurity and thoughts of suicide. You know, the way that we approach crisis at Kids Help Phone is that it's, we don't determine what a crisis is for the young person. If it's a crisis to them, it's a crisis to us. And if they're worried about a midterm at school, while all of their classes are online and that is causing them great distress, that is something that they can certainly reach out to us for, as well as, you know, loneliness, anxiety, bullying, and everything on this list is very much in line with how we provide support as well. Perfect. All right, so I think we can actually take a look at some of the real data that we've pulled in from the last year. And so the next slide, I think I'm going to turn it over to Paula.
Thanks, Kara. I just wanted to show how you can have a deeper dive about our data. And Kara is going to share the link to this page, which is open, which is public. And it's a new feature from our website, and it's accessible to everyone. We really wanted to be transparent with our audience, as well with all the people interested in supporting young people like you or yourself. And so don't hesitate to have a look at this page that will show you the most updated features in terms of the most updated figures, sorry, in terms of data for all the country, the provinces, and our different services. Regarding some recent data that we wanted to show you, sorry, it takes a few seconds to my page to charge. Okay. Yes. So these are very recent, and they are about the differences highlighted between our average daily conversations from 2019 to 2020. We really wanted to see the impact of the pandemic on the topics that have been brought by our audience. And it's interesting to make the connection with your answers before, so that there were a lot of answers about anxiety and stress and a lot of mental health different conditions. And there were also some people who highlighted specific related concerns, COVID related crisis, I think it was the term. So as we can see here, there has been an increase of 105% of conversations about eating body image in 2020 compared to 2019. This means that one of the most worrying situation, and this is just about the province of Ontario, by the way, and regarding our texting data, we are going to talk more about our different services, but it's interesting to see how the eating body image has been a concern and an issue for people who reached out to us, probably perhaps because of the lockdown and people were isolated at home and couldn't access to activities, you know, that like sport or outdoors or other forms of self-care, and this had a huge impact on self-image and body image. Another understandable figure, and maybe regarding also the pandemic, is the data about grief. So there has been 91% more of conversation about grief, understandably, because we know that a lot of people unfortunately were sick and died of this virus. And a lot of conversations increase about substance abuse or gender and sexual identity. And we can imagine also the effect of the lockdown and being also sometimes isolated with people with whom we can really disclose some situations we are going through, which is also what comes out from the next slide. So the bottom part is the same, but on the top part you can see the pink line is basically COVID-19 conversation. So, and the spike, of course, is in April, and then we have some very slightly differences between our services, phone and texting. But what is important to say here is that 69% of our clients mentioned feelings not shared with anyone else. And perhaps there has also been an increase in demands for our text service because it was more private. So there was the confidentiality issue related to the lockdown conditions that seemed to emerge from our data as something important. So, sorry. Okay, I wanted to say something about our services now, and this same information, presentation of our services can also be found on our homepage, which Kira is going to share on the chat. And I wanted to say a few words about our counseling services, which are our historical services, because they are provided since 30 years, the phone line. And then in the last few years, we introduced the chat service, which is currently closed. But don't worry, it will come back soon. We don't know when exactly, but it will be in some time, let's say. Our counseling services are run by professional counselors. What is important to say is that they are both anonymous and confidential. So the phone and the chat, which is now not operational, but let's say the phone. So it's anonymous. This means that there is no way for us to track back who is reaching out to us, unless there are some few conditions related, of course, to duty to report. These services are operated by professional counselors. They are, of course, bilingual, and they are open 24/7. They are the audience we target are young people and emerging adults up to 29 years old, and also post-secondary students in some provinces, specifically Ontario and Nova Scotia. I let Kara introduce the texting service now.
Yes, thank you, Paula. So the texting service is, kind of a complement to the counseling service. It is a little bit different, though, in that it is confidential but not anonymous, which means that if there becomes a situation where the texter messaging in, there's imminent risk of harm, or there's a reason for us to believe they are a minor in need of protection, the clinical supervisor, so the paid Kids Helpline staff, may request the phone number in order for us to connect them with emergency services. But the main person who will be connecting with these texters in need of support will actually be trained volunteer crisis responders. So our counseling service is run by professional counselors, and our texting service is run by trained volunteers who are overseen by professional clinicians, professional supervisors. The service is bilingual, so you can reach out and receive crisis support service in both English and French. But because it's not meant to be a substitute for long-term professional counseling, it's more of an opportunity to receive crisis support and active listening from a trained volunteer if you are in between appointments with a professional, or you don't necessarily want to speak to a counselor about your issue at this time. It's 24/7 and is actually open to all ages, not just youth. We have partnered with Wellness Together Canada in order to bring this texting service to frontline workers, adults struggling during the pandemic, as well as adults who are wanting to message in concerned about a young person in their life. I'll pass it back to Paula for the resources around this section.
Thanks, Kara. So we do have a big database of resources that can be accessible by everyone who goes on our website. Once again, is the homepage with all the tabs that I showed at the beginning. And we do have over 10,000 services listed in our database. And basically, these are also the resources that are shared by our volunteer responders from the texting service. Regarding the counseling services, we have an inner database, which is even more, even richer than the one that we have on our website. But it's interesting to have a resource which is accessible to anyone, and young people and their parents or the people who support them can also access to these resources. So it's of course a pan-Canadian database and bilingual. And we also have, in addition to the database, a lot of articles and other resources that we are going to share with you today. And that's the goal of this presentation. So we hope you are as excited as us to have a look at these resources. Sorry, just my screen. Okay.
Amazing. So the next piece I'm going to talk about is actually a bit of a self-indulgent topic for me. So as the manager of the community crisis responders for the texting department, I wanted to talk a little bit about how the e-mental health landscape has really influenced Kids Help Phone's movement to this new service that we launched back in 2018 called Crisis Text Line powered by Kids Help Phone. So some of the barriers for young people receiving services, even before the pandemic, were numerous. Despite prevalence of mental health challenges, it was estimated that fewer than 1/3 of Canadians affected sought treatment or sought support. Some of those reasons did include that young people felt their problems would go away or were not serious, which was seen in Paula's stats that we showed earlier around people not, over 60% of people not sharing a topic that they had before with our crisis responders. Long waiting lists, this is again pre-pandemic, the stigma of disclosing mental health struggles, lack of services or clinicians, and especially the rural and remote areas of Canada, the lack of extended hours beyond 9 to 5, and the very real fact now that young people don't actually own cell phones in order to talk on them. We're definitely moving into a more text-based or written form of communication. That is what's most comfortable for a lot of young people these days. This type of support typically takes significantly longer because it's not as quick as talking back and forth, which makes it challenging to meet that kind of demand. Young people expect that they can reach out for support utilizing the technology that they already have in their pocket. And so that was kind of what inspired Kids Help Phone's decision to offer texting as an option for receiving crisis support. So they can use the technology young people have right in their pocket, which is really exciting. So if we move on to the next slide, I would love to talk a little bit about how youth resilience in the digital age really brought forward this new service. So it actually launched as a service trial back in Manitoba in Feb of 2018, and Manitoba was chosen as the pilot province for a few reasons. Manitoba is a smaller province compared to Ontario and BC and Quebec, so we thought it would be a really great place for us to kind of try out this new service model, see if Canadians were interested in reaching out and communicating this way. It was also the first service at Kids Help Phone to be run and supported by volunteers. And that is a service we definitely wanted to test out and make sure the model worked, that our volunteers felt prepared, comfortable and confident in supporting youth in crisis this way. And also that it was nimble and scalable. So even though our 6-month pilot was supposed to be contained within Manitoba for those first 6 months as we were kind of working out the kinks, we were able to expand and reach out to affected communities within 24 hours of those communities needing that support. So if you all remember back in 2018, there was the Humboldt Broncos bus crash. And within 24 hours of that crash, we decided to extend our texting services not only to Manitoba, but also to Alberta and Saskatchewan, where a number of those families were impacted by the tragedy that was that crash. And we received, really wonderful outpourings of support and conversations of grief from people who were impacted by that, who normally wouldn't be able to reach out in that way because we weren't yet in those provinces, but we were able to early because of the wonderful work our volunteers were doing. There was also a state of emergency announced in Nunavut that summer, where they were seeing higher than ever youth suicide rates in Nunavut. And that's when we also decided to expand our pilot during that 6-month period to Nunavut. Finally, later that fall, there was the van attack in North York. And within 24 hours of that, we decided to reach out to the Toronto District School Board and make sure that that the young people and the students who lived in that area knew that Kids Help Phone was available to them via text if they wanted to talk about their experience. And we were getting conversations from young people saying that they were nervous. That was the route that they took to the bus stop, and it made them really nervous to go outside. And they were able to talk to a volunteer crisis responder about those worries and process with them in the way that they preferred to communicate most, which was via text or via nonverbal means of communication. The pilot went wonderfully well, as you probably expect. We rolled out the English and French side of the service, so we are now bilingual on November 6th of 2018. And as of today, I just checked, we have had over 386,000 texting conversations across Canada as of Feb 11th, which is absolutely wonderful. I also want to speak a little bit about severity over chronology and what that means for us. So we are the first helpline in Canada, meaning the texting service specifically, that triages our service users based on need. So let's say you were you had an issue on your cell phone bill and you wanted to call your cell phone carrier and ask for customer support to figure out this problem on your bill. You would call and they would put you on hold for however long you need to be put on hold for in order to be reached by a customer service rep. But we don't actually kind of do it as a first come first serve basis on our texting service, because we have really cool AI queue tech that we have borrowed from our service partners over at Crisis Text Line US. They're able to triage texters in our queue based on the severity of their crisis versus when they text into us. So with this model, we're actually able to reach out or connect to texters in crisis who are actively in crisis in under a minute. And so what does actively in crisis mean? Basically, there is a triaging message when they first reach out to us using our short code, and our special algorithm analyzes that message for high-risk language. And if they do use high-risk language, that they actually get bumped up to the top of the queue and get seen faster. So most people who exhibit that high-risk language get matched with a volunteer crisis responder in less than 1 minute. And 93% of texters in the last month have been matched in less than 5 minutes, regardless of their state of crisis. So that's something that we're very proud of here at Kids Help Phone, that we are triaging and meeting people's needs based on the level of urgency that they present to us. But regardless of whatever your level of urgency is, you are still being seen in less than 5 minutes with our texting service. And so that's the first of its kind in Canada, and we're hoping to bring this technology also to our phone counseling lines in the future. Great. All right, that's texting. I'll turn it over to Paula.
There's also a couple of questions, and perhaps in the next slide, I can probably answer to some points that have been highlighted. One of the question was about why texting service is not anonymous, and if this is explained to folks accessing the service, and also does this deter people from continuing to use text. Perhaps this is a question for Kara, but I think it's also related to what we are going to explain about our step care model. So I don't know, Kara, if you wanted to say
Yeah.
something about it.
Yeah, I can definitely pop in for that. So it is explained when you message into our texting service for the first time, you receive a number of system messages up front before you're able to share anything. And it explains in very plain language that most young people would understand that your conversation with your volunteer crisis responder is confidential. However, we will have access to your phone number if we believe that you're in serious harm or in danger. And if someone wants to read into that a little bit more, what conditions or what our due to report is, our terms of service is linked directly into that system message if they would like to read more about what that means before they continue our conversation with us. If they would prefer to speak to a service that is anonymous and confidential, we would be happy to then refer them over to our counseling line, which is professional counselors who are anonymous and confidential.
And which brings me to talk a little bit about the step care model. So what is the step care model? I think that Kara, when she mentioned how the texting service works with the triage system, this is something that has been so helpful that we decided to apply the lessons learned from that service and to the rest of our services. So before, we used to operate with a quite traditional service delivery strategy. It means that we had like the counseling services, and these counseling services are operated by, of course, professional counselors, and that's why also there is the anonymity, because I mean it's something which is more handleable for professional counselors. And I mean, there's other reasons, but just to be sure now. But we also noticed that there were some people and some situations that required a more immediate action. So as Kara said, we try to offer a differentiated panel of resources in order to see if we could support step out or step down people according to their needs. So let's say there is an place which is not easily accessible in terms of internet connection, then perhaps the preference will go to the texting service. But if there is a more there is a situation where we can definitely have an easier access, and maybe we can wait a little bit more, then we can access to a professional counselor. But there is also an amount of resources that we have started to provide via our website. We are going to show you some funny exercises you can access yourself, and these resources definitely allow to triage, so to have that selection system, and also to the young people to be autonomous, to feel empowered by the fact that they are helping themselves. There is also going to be a digital peer support resource, which is going to be implemented soon. We are recruiting the moderators right now, so it's quite exciting. And so all this to say that we wanted to reproduce in our services the full ecosystem of supports that that serve different purposes for our clients. And that's why we also wanted to show you how concretely this step care model work. Before showing you how it works, I'm seeing another question in the chat about support for students who wish to speak to someone who is trained or represent the LGBTQ+, Indigenous or Black racialized communities. We definitely have training, specific training from partner organizations or experts who train our counselors to respond to different kind of audience, and we are very committed to serve a diverse population, especially the BIPOC population and the LGBTQ+ population. So you can see also some statements and maybe nice articles and information on our website. Our staff is definitely attending a lot of training to catch up and be able to provide support to newcomers. We also had a pilot last year for an Arabic service of phonic counseling through interpreters. There's going to be more. I cannot say that much, but we definitely want to reach out the as much youth as possible. It's also our mission, and especially the vulnerable groups or groups who experience oppression and discrimination at different levels. So
I can pop in, Paola, for one quick note
go
about
ahead.
this on texting. Thank you. So exactly what Paola said is the exact same case for the texting department. We always strive to provide continuing education and recruit volunteers from all different backgrounds and identities to make sure that our volunteer community represents the community that they serve. But one of the really cool things that we just launched last October is something we call the Indigenous Texter Matching Program, which is a program that was developed with our Finding Hope project in mind, which is our Kids Help Phone's commitment to truth and reconciliation with Indigenous peoples of Canada. And with that program, we are actively hoping to match texters who identify as Indigenous in their texting conversation with crisis responders who also identify as Indigenous. And if they are available, crisis responders who are also part of the same nation or group. So that is something that launched last October. We're still in the pilot stages, and we're still gathering data on how well received that is by our Indigenous young people across Canada. And as that program develops, we'll look into other ways that we can apply that model to other groups as well.
Thanks, Karen. That was a fundamental point that I missed. We do have a lot of upcoming projects around working with Indigenous communities, Black communities, and all the communities that were mentioned. So I probably forget things. And another thing I forgot to say is that the chat service is closed because of COVID, because we wanted to maximize the access to our other services, which have an accessibility which is higher. Yes, of course, we're going to share this presentation. Someone is asking. So just to show you a little bit our website in action and some of the other resources that we didn't mention more concretely. We decided to take the first example of the topics that were increased in 2020 compared to 2019. So the body image disorder. And there's a bunch of resources around the body image and eating disorders and all these issues on our website. And I decided to show in this slide a little bit of a composition. It's not all that we have more. But you can definitely find some articles targeting specifically young people and their worries regarding the subject, their situations. There was also some answers from experts to young people specific questions around eating disorders, for instance. And we also have a partnership with NAEDIC, which is an organization that is an expert on these topics. Then we do have activities, exercises. We really want young people to be involved in the building their mental health and also building resources that are useful for them. And so there is a write a letter to the eating disorder. We encourage you to have a look at. It can be a really powerful resource for someone who experienced an eating disorder. We also have resources to support friends. And finally, we have resources for caring adults. Just to show you a little snapshot, it will be the resource for helping adults, sorry. And you can see there's information, but there's also a lot of tips that you can read, and there's some other related additional resources and articles you can navigate through. So of course, I'm not going to read the details, but just to show you just on one single topic, how many things our website can provide. And it's really simple to navigate. It's just from our main page, homepage, you can just write in here what is that you are looking for, and you will get all this menu of resources, most of which some of which I showed. That's for the topic that we saw at the beginning. But then there's more things that we really wanted, we're excited to show you, and perhaps we want to give you a demonstration of how Resources Around Me, the database, works. And Kara is going to facilitate a funny exercise, and I'm going to be the writer here. So go
Yes,
ahead.
thank you, Paula. So basically, like Paula was sharing, Resources Around Me is a very thorough database with over 10,000 different entries of local services across Canada that have been vetted by our knowledge translation team for being low cost or low fee, not requiring referral, and being accessible to young people. So I would love for the audience to put in some suggestions for us. What we're looking for is a city or a town, maybe your hometown, and maybe a topic that you think would be a great resource for us to look up. So for example, we would look up a resource on, we would look for a women's shelter in Calgary, for example. If anyone wanted to just have a think and throw a city or a town in the chat, and maybe someone else can throw in a topic that, oh, and we have the drop-down menu as well for the different kinds of categories we have sorted in our database. Oh, perfect, we have one here.
I can
Awesome.
see someone, Ottawa.
Yes, and LGBTQ+ services.
Okay, so here we do have the category already set, which facilitates greatly my life right now. Okay, so we have 17 entries here in the Ottawa region, and if I click on the black spot, it will normally give me every time that I click, I have a closer view of the resources. So I have 8 here in the north, 3 here in the south. So let's see, I want to go a little bit west. Okay, then I can see there's 2 resources here. Okay, maybe it's the same resource. Sometimes, you know, there is one center and some like 2 centers that are interconnected, or 2 numbers or 2 resources. Anyway, you can see all the information here. You can also open another tab with more details. You can navigate through the partner website resource and see all the information, the eligibility, what would be the audience that they target, how to reach out to them, you know, the accessibility, which is very important too, the languages. So yeah, that's basically how it works. Oh, there's another. So I'm going to take a second request here. It's homelessness, Kenora. Okay. Kenora is the name of the city in northwestern. Oh, there's 2. No, in Ontario. Sorry, is the person? Does the person mean Kenora, Ontario? Because
I think it looks like Kenora, Ontario. Yeah.
Oh, okay, sorry. I thought it was not north.
Oh wait, it's a W. Oh, interesting. Maybe I.
No, it's
different
me. Okay, let's say it's Kenora, Ontario, and I apologize if it's not. So someone is looking for resources about homelessness. So I'm going to go here, housing and homelessness support, and then find resources again. It takes a few seconds, but it works really well. Don't be scared by the technology. So there's 2 in Kenora, which I imagine is a pretty small place. And you can see here, we can also find there's a youth wellness hubs. So there's a telephone and a website, and there's different information here. You can navigate through the eligibility and the accessibility and the plan. So thank you so much. That's all for this session. And now we are going to show you another very funny feature of our website. Kara.
Yes. Okay. This is probably one of my favorite pages on our website, and it's called Breathing Balloon. Some of you who are familiar with mindfulness practices or something might be familiar with this technique, but I think a lot of young people prefer seeing it visualized. It's basically a balloon that inflates and deflates according to how it would like you to follow your breath, similar to 2-1 breathing or square breathing. So if you all wanted to just watch this animated balloon with me. Take a moment, feel it in your chest, your belly, your diaphragm, and breathe out as it deflates and breathe in as it inflates. So we'll just do that for a couple of rounds together.
I could continue forever.
Same. I just love watching this animation. I think it's so entertaining. And this is definitely something, a resource that we share with our texters, or our volunteer crisis responders share with our texters, because we can't really walk through a breathing exercise if they're in the middle of a panic attack or an anxiety attack. We send this visualization for them to open and kind of use on their own time before they come back to the conversation and talk about what's bothering them.
Thanks, Kara.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of other resources we wanted to show you. There's a lot of them, so we really had to choose. It was very frustrating because we like them all. This is a safety planner. So it's basically a very simple tool that is has been elaborated to create a safety plan. Right now, I cannot see it because I've created one that I wanted to show you, sorry. I wanted to show you. Of course, it's not a real one, but that's how it looked like at the end of the exercise. So it asks the person, the young person, who are the person they would like to inform in case of crisis, in case they have someone who might hurt them, or there might be a situation they want to maybe escape from. So they might enter all the information. They are asked by the system to enter the name of the persons, or who are they, how they can be reached out, and what could be some activities as well that they can do to be safe, to stay safe. So it's basically a plan that they can also download and print out and have it with them when something happens. So it's a kind of backup system that a young person can put literally in their pocket. And the last resource that I wanted to show you, it's also a funny one. It's referred to the breathing balloon. Maybe the safety plan is not funny, but it's useful. So this is called the Worry Rockets, and it's definitely my favorite one because I'm a very anxious person. So if I make a rocket now, I hope that the conference goes well. Okay, and now I kind of launch it. It really feels as a real one when I do that. So I feel completely relieved from the tension, and you can send as many as you want, Worry Rockets, and it's another resource that helps, to empower young people when they feel some anxiety or worries, and they can definitely access them very fast. So what we wanted to say with this presentation, and I'm not going to take much longer because we really want to hear your questions, is that through this triage system and step care model and our services and our website, we hope to promote the responsibility and autonomy and strength and resilience of young people. So not just responding to issues or crises, but also help them, support them in an amount of ways that are really user-friendly and adjusted to their language and their needs. Also, these resources are really easy to access by a smartphone, by a laptop. So they are, and they can be also printed or downloaded. We do have some coloring resources, all kind of things that are really suited to young people, and especially in a pandemic time where other things are not available. So we hope to continue learning growth from you and from the young people that access to our services. and to empower them, because that's finally what we want to succeed. We hope to succeed, and we are here to learn more, to have your feedback about how to do this together. Thank you very much. That's all for us, and we are happy to take any questions or comments around the presentation.
Great. Thank you very much, Kara and Paola. I hope you all enjoyed this incredible presentation. As Paola noted, yes, at this time we'll be answering questions. We do have one in the Q&A chat box that I'll read out loud for you too. So how do resources and organizations get added to the Resource Near Me app / website? So is there a way to request a service be added to the page if it's not already on there?
That's a great question. We do have a great team of resource specialists. We have a lot of people who work around the database and keeping updated. So there are ways on the website to write, even if you just fill the form to send a request about our services. It also goes to the right, I would say, to the right person, because there's an internal system of triage of the requests. So don't hesitate to drop us a line through the form on our website, and we'll, if you have a resource to recommend us, which is not listed yet, and we will be happy to have our team of resource specialists working out and reaching that resource and see if it is fit to our criteria, which is probably, I mean, we are happy to have more resources and partners. So thanks. Kara, you want to say something about this?
No, I think you hit it right on the head. It's definitely, if you go to our Resources Around Me website, or we call it RAM for fun, there is a little menu on the top right corner of your page that will show you some of the inclusion and exclusion criteria that we look for when researching different resources for RAM. So if you want to do some sleuthing for yourself, just double check that the resource you would like to suggest fit that criteria. As we mentioned earlier, we're looking for services that are targeted to young people, so between the ages of 5 and 25 usually, that it's free or sliding scale, and all that great stuff.
There's other questions. I don't know if I have to look at the chat or the Q&A. I think both. There's one question about, will more resources become available in different languages to support newcomers? That's definitely something we are looking at. I can't say when or what languages, but it's definitely part of our projects upcoming. I don't know if Kara wants to say something on that.
No, I think that's exactly it. I think the pilots that we're doing with the newcomer pilot and providing counseling in Arabic is definitely a kind of a jumping off point for us to figure out what the demand is. You know, when pilots like that are successful, that's definitely when we can start moving more resources into finding more resources in that language, or developing those resources internally. I also just want to make a note of that question right before. It's I don't have a question. I just wanted to share that your social media presence is great on Instagram. I share your content daily. Thank you so much for saying that. And I'll also bring this back to our social team. Shout out to Jeff and JK for creating such fabulous content. Yeah, thank you.
So so I'm going through the chat and then to the Q&A. So there's another question on the chat. Do you find that you have repeat calls because local services are so overwhelmed and youth are unable to access support? What do you mean by repeat calls? People who reach out to us frequently? Is that the question? I'm not sure if okay, I try to interpret the question. So of course, yes, there's a lot of young people who mention the fact that they are unable to access services. But there are also young people who have access to services and who still reach out to us, in addition to having a support from, I don't know, a social worker or a psychologist, and sometimes they just need someone else, which maybe, who maybe is not that close to their situation. And the fact that we don't see them, sometimes people, especially young people with eating disorders, that we do not see them. It might be kind of an advantage to have that space for some moments just to be seen in a different way, and they can tell us what they want, and that's their freedom too. So I think it's very empowering, but of course, from the other hand, sometimes the fact that they reach out to us while waiting for other services might be frustrating, and that's why also our service has operated much more in the last year, because there has been a lot of emergency across the country. So yes, definitely. Then the questions on the Q&A, is there anything comparable to this platform in the US? Maybe Karen knows better than me, so I let her answer.
Yeah, I can pop in. So by platform, I will kind of assume one of two platforms. So the first is the texting service. So I mentioned our service partners with Crisis Text Line US. So yes, the texting service does exist in the United States. Canada was one of, or actually was the first international affiliate to partner with Crisis Text Line US to bring a texting service like this to another English-speaking country. They've also expanded into the UK and in Ireland. But if you're looking for a service similar to the one that we offer at Kids Help Phone, but in the United States, Crisis Text Line US is Googleable, and their short code is available to anyone texting in from the US. In terms of the RAM platform, or the resources around me platform, I'm not super familiar if there's one that is developed in-house by another organization, but I know our partners over on the US have a really wonderful wealth of resources that their volunteers use on their texting platform. I'm not sure if it's available to the public, but they definitely do have kind of a library of different websites that they kind of gather for their own internal use. And I'll also just touch on the question that also came in the chat around launching the Finding Hope program for Indigenous youth. Would love to read more about that as I work with Indigenous youth, and it sounds really awesome. Yeah, so the Indigenous Youth Action Plan has actually been something that has been ongoing for the last year or so, or year and a half. The Indigenous Texture Matching Program launched as a pilot last October. And if you'd like to read up on the different initiatives that Kids Help Phone is undergoing as part of the Indigenous Youth Action Plan, I'm throwing a link into the chat. We also do have an Indigenous Advisory Committee where we kind of consult with members of the different Indigenous groups across Canada as we make decisions on policy and future programs in line with Finding Hope. Paula, do you have any other things to add to that?
I think there's more coming on this aspect, but yes, if you follow the link that Kara gave you, there's all the info and also the upcoming projects.
So we still have time for a few more questions. If you have any lingering ones, you can toss them in the chat or the Q&A. I'll just wait about 30 seconds and see if anything new pops in.
Si vous avez des questions en français, n'hésitez pas. Hein? Ça va me faire plaisir. I'm going to be happy to answer in French.
Okay, I think that's it for questions for now, but of course, feel free to pop them into the chat, and I'm sure Kara and Paolo would be happy to answer them afterwards. So again, this brings us to the end of the session. We invite you to view resources and recordings of the event on the conference page, digitalresilience.ca, and to tweet about the conference session using hashtag #DigitalResilience2021 and to tag us on social media. So thanks again to Kara and Paula for answering those questions and for the great presentation on youth mental health across Canada with a goal to promote youth autonomy, self-determination, and self-directed support. I really appreciated the practical resources that you provided, including the resources page around me. I didn't know that existed. And the breathing balloon was very useful, especially for me today. So again, thank you. And it was a pleasure to have you with us. And thank you all for attending.